people don't think of Dell as being so cutting edge anymore as they once did, right? It was the big roaring stock in the 90s, and people paid a lot of attention to it. And I think that's made some people overlook this news a little bit. But Dell is the #3 manufacturer of PCs in the United States. And for them to say pretty aggressively, actually, that not only do they not want any China-made, they don't want China-made chips in their machines, and that includes suppliers that are not China-based manufacturers. That is to say, if TSMC has a fab facility inside China, they don't want those chips inside their machine either. So this is, of course, all according to a report that ran in Nikkei last week, but apparently has been confirmed by some Taiwanese sources. So that's taken just a step further, I think, than people might have expected at this stage.
Okay. But it's quite profound, isn't it? I'm going off a South China Morning Post report that references the Nikkei as well, Ted. Ted may move 50%. Dell may move, not Ted. Dell may move 50% of its production out of the country by 2025. Isn't there a risk that they are going to be sacrificing market share by moving production offshore in an effort to, I get it, de-risk and diversify the supply chain?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And something that isn't said in that Nikkei story, but if you read a little bit between the lines there, they're not talking about, according to Nikkei, they're not talking about moving all of their assembly, all of their manufacturing out of China. They're specifically saying we don't want semiconductor, we don't want chips that are made in China in our machines. So I was thinking about it this morning, that probably provides them still with some leverage. They still will have manufacturing operations that take place in China, and that would seem to mitigate, some of that risk of being cut off from the Chinese market, which is the big risk, right? That's the thing that everybody wants to avoid. Though apparently, according to Nikkei again, they have indicated to other suppliers of things like motherboards that they want those electronic components also manufactured out of China.
Well, it's a hedge, isn't it? It's a hedge against China-based manufacturing. It's a hedge against the geopolitics. And to what degree is this top-down driven, Ted, and aligned with the national US policy that you and I have talked so much about of decoupling and building resiliency and domestically friendshoring and nearshoring in an effort to diversify and de-risk?
Yeah, that's a great question. I asked Chris Miller, who wrote an excellent book about this topic called Chip War. I asked him about this last night, and he said, these manufacturers they don't want to do this. Obviously, there's a big expense that incurs. China, as we've said before, has a well-established manufacturing ecosystem that it's difficult to extricate oneself from. However, the risk of having to pull out of China quickly is as they like to say in policy circles, a non-zero risk. It could actually happen. And as of October, when the Biden administration seriously curtailed the exporting of not just chips, but more significantly, chip know-how and chip technology to China, that got a lot of people's attention. SMIC said in November that they were seeing reticence by some of the U.S. chip designers in terms of placing orders with their fabs in China. So it's definitely a reaction to the U.S. policy.
It's such a tough one because to an extent you do need to have a toehold in China to really leverage off that market and the growth there. Let's put that one to a side. What's doing the rounds in terms of clicks? I mean, we're seeing this fascinating two-way in the markets, this game of chicken between the Fed and the financial markets. What's getting the clicks on .com?
Yeah, there's a story about the Fed that is actually the biggest story on the site right now among Asia-Pacific-based readers about Powell actually giving a very full-throated defense of Fed independence and Fed independence from political influence. Of course, Donald Trump tried to influence the Fed almost as a hobby to help himself politically. But Powell also singled out climate change activists who think that the Fed should be working to address climate change. And he said, we're not that type of organization, and we're not ever going to be that type of organization. So that's an interesting story. Also, the story that you guys referenced a moment ago about Chinese travelers, this is from our own Monica Petrelli here in Singapore, Chinese travelers being upset about not being able to travel to, or as easily travel to some countries. And they're angry at a couple countries in particular. Those countries are Japan and South Korea.
Nice.
And then finally, we have a story on the site about Consumer Reports tested chocolates for lead content and found 5 prominent global brands, or let's say 4 of them are global brands, that have a higher than average lead and cadmium content. So you can imagine why people are reading
What's
that.
lead and cadmium doing in chocolate?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I know that a lot of people are very curious to know if their favorite chocolate is one of those chocolates that's got
I'm going to
that
click
problem.
on. I'm going to go and find out. Gosh.
Something's going wrong in the production process somewhere.